It's quite a career. I mean, starting out doing film, doing small, tiny films. Already, everything that I've heard, it's a paradox. A business, graduating in business, yet doing these independent films, movies, children's television. I mean, there's a lot of paradox in there. And I guess my first question is, we started Decode in 1997.
Right.
And you were doing film before that successfully, and at Alliance, and then with Due South, 1 hour drama. And you had the experience, I guess, of moving into children's programming through Reboot. And why did you stay in children's television?
Well, we'd actually made we had a number of kids programs that we made at Alliance. A show called Captain Star. Did anybody know Captain Star? Crazy animated series that we made for Teletoon, and The Adventures of the Black Stallion, and some other kids programs. But there were a number of reasons why after, 10 or 11 years of working in kind of the feature film and the primetime television area, I wanted to focus on kids. One of them is I had young kids, and I could see the power of television in their eyes. But the other thing is, I actually think that Canada has a comparative advantage in kids programming, and that's for a bunch whereas it hasn't really in feature film or 1 hour drama. Specifically, a lot of in animation, a huge amount of the animation software that is now used for all of the special effects and big movies was created in Canada. Some of it coming out of research programs from the National Research Council and the National Film Board. So Softimage and Maya, that kind of software. That's the first thing. The second thing is the National Film Board had long been investing in animation on the other side, the creative side. Those are two things. The third thing is that it's an area where, from my point of view, I thought that we could actually create programs that would sell internationally. And in fact, there were a couple of companies in Canada that had been doing that very successfully. And kids programming travels well, especially animation, which can be dubbed and translated into different languages and sold around the world. So there was another thing. And the final thing was I had spent a fair bit of time in Los Angeles in the primetime television area as we were focused on the networks. And one of the things that I saw in the primetime network business was that the people who were in the programming chair changed about every 2 years. And you know this from just reading about how primetime network programming works. Is they do whatever X number of pilots, and one will survive and go to series and might only last 6 or 8 episodes and then be pulled off the air. The stakes are very, very high, and things change with great velocity. Kids' business was very different. It tended to be populated by people who were in it for the long run. Programmers tended to stay in their jobs for a long time, and were, and in some ways, I guess I want to say it was a kinder, gentler world. And there were actually a lot of people in it who cared specifically about the kids they were programming for, particularly at the public broadcasters. So for me, there were 3 or 4 things that were really appealing about the kids area.
The business has changed a lot. I mean, when you launched Decode in 1997, it was a very exciting time. There were a lot of broadcasters, commercial channels starting around the world. Disney, Nick, they were opening up channels around the world. It was a real period of growth, and it was very exciting. And so when shows like Angela Anaconda came out, they were so visually compelling. There was such talk. And today, we've sort of seen with Reboot, you mentioned Reboot. I was at Polygram and Polygram would do all the home video for Reboot, and I have to say it was incredible. It was one of the first series to have such massive success on home video, which could prove that television series, rather than just feature film, would sell on home video. And it was really one of the first series that launched the whole kids video business, which has since basically died. And we've seen it sort of grow and gone down. But now you mentioned VOD as an area of growth. So even for programs that that didn't necessarily get distribution on television, I mean, with the acquisition of Cookie Jar, was that the main reason that that DHX would buy Cookie Jar? Do you have to go big?
Well, our business plan has been to build a library. And so Cookie Jar was actually the combination of a number of different libraries in any case. And what we've believed is that in order to have a compelling offering in the video on demand world, you need to have a volume of shows. And I guess it's one of the things about the way the industry has evolved is that, you know, there was that opportunity, there has been that opportunity for us to consolidate you know, a large catalog of rights. And for anybody launching a video on demand service around the world, that's our catalog's been a compelling proposition with recognizable properties and in some ways a one-stop shop. But I do want to just go back to one thing about, because you started a little talking a little bit about Reboot and its success on video on DVD at the time, which was a because not every, as you know, not every kid's property does well on DVD. But one of the things that I'm interested in kind of creatively is that show over 39 episodes had a story arc that covered the whole thing. Like you could figure out what was going on just by watching individual episodes, but if you bought the DVD, you could watch all of season 1 as if it were almost like a movie, right? And I think that's one of the reasons that it sold well then, and I think it will ultimately, you know, do well as a video on demand title. But it's also one of the things that narratively no longer happens in the kids space, which it's that show, even though it was had a huge amount of action and adventure in it, there was a ton of comedy in it as well. If anything, the world's gone much more towards comedy, which doesn't necessarily lend itself or it seems require these longer story arcs. So again, for the writers out there, it's a very different a story proposition than series that where, you know, it doesn't matter what order you see them in. Now, I'm saying this because when you think about Netflix now and House of Cards, you know, a long arc, it does seem, and I'm coming back to a point, I do have one, is when you look and say what's going to work well in the video on demand world, it seems to me that audiences will choose to watch those things that they can stick with for a while, and I mean, I do. It seems that the numbers are in, and other people are doing that, but it's something that's not happening in the kids' world, and I'm interested in that.